Hey there, Brian here. There's an old idea in theology that has always fascinated me. It comes from the opening pages of Scripture that human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. Now, people have argued for centuries about what that means. Some say it refers to reason, others say it means moral awareness, some say it means our capacity for love. But I suspect something else is going on here. If God is the creator and we are made in the image of that creator, then it stands to reason that creativity itself is woven into our very nature. In other words, we are meant to be little creators, not creators in the cosmic sense, of course. We're not making galaxies or breathing life into dust, but we participate in creation in our own small and beautiful ways. Hey, while we're talking about it, creation takes many forms. Sometimes it looks like painting or melting glass at a torch. Sometimes it looks like telling stories, sharing ideas, and making the occasional YouTube video. This little corner of the internet is one of the places where I practice that craft. So if you're enjoying the conversation, please go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the channel grow, it keeps the algorithm gods mildly appeased, and it lets me know there are fellow little creators out there walking this road with me. Thanks so much. So, if you go back to the beginning of the Bible, you see something interesting about God's first introduction to humanity. The story begins not with a rule book, not with commandments, not certainly with doctrine. It begins with creation. In the beginning, the text says, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and empty, darkness over the deep, and the Spirit of God moving over the waters. And then something extraordinary begins to happen. God starts making things. Let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. Then the sky, then the seas, then the dry land pushing up through the waters, then plants and trees and seeds, then the sun and the moon and the great spinning lights of the heavens, then fish in the seas and the birds of the air, then animals walking the earth. And after every act of creation, there is this quiet refrain that echoes through the story. And God saw that it was good. Creation is not an accident in the biblical story. Creation is the first revelation of who God is. God is a maker, a shaper, an artist of worlds. And then, somewhere deep in that unfolding story, God does something that has fascinated theologians for thousands of years. God creates human beings, but the text pauses here. The rhythm slows down, and it says something different. Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness. And so humanity enters the story not just as another creature among creatures, but as a reflection of the Creator, made in the image of the one who makes things. And I've come to believe that means something very practical. It means creativity is not optional for us. It is a part of who we are. And sometimes we don't even realize it's happening. Years ago, I began working on a series of abstract paintings, acrylic on canvas, large pieces, about 2 feet by 3 feet. I didn't begin with a plan or a theme. I simply started painting. Color, motion, texture, one canvas after another. The paintings felt completely unrelated to each other, or so I thought. But somewhere around the fourth painting, something dawned on me. I stepped back and looked at what I had done so far, and suddenly I saw it. Without planning it, without intending it, without even realizing it, I had begun painting the 7 days of creation. The first canvas was light and color emerging out of darkness. The next carried movement and separation, sky and water. Then came land and growing forms. And as the series unfolded, the patterns became unmistakable. One painting after another seemed to reveal the next movement of that ancient story from Genesis. It wasn't something I set out to do. It was something that revealed itself along the way. And that, I think, is one of the mysterious things about creativity. Sometimes the work knows what it is before we do. Sometimes the act of creation becomes a form of discovery. You begin with a blank canvas or a rod of glass or a piece of wood or a line on a page. And somewhere in that process, something begins to emerge, not forced, not engineered, but revealed, which makes me wonder if creativity is not just about making things, but about uncovering things, participating in something that is already moving quietly beneath the surface of the world. It reminds me of something my mother used to say: whatever is going to happen has already begun. And here at the Torch, that idea feels very real to me. What you're seeing here is not the finished piece. It's obviously not a hummingbird. These are just hummingbird wings, little glass wings made one at a time, dozens of them, sometimes hundreds of them. A stockpile for the work that will come later. By themselves, they are simply wings. Just glass and heat and patience and time. But each one is a small act of creation. Sand becomes glass, glass becomes shape, shape becomes something that didn't exist before this moment. And somewhere in that process, the human spirit is doing what it was made to do, creating. Now, when we hear the word create, many people immediately think of procreation. And certainly, that's one of the ways human beings participate in the ongoing unfolding of life. But creativity is far broader than that. A carpenter creates a table, a gardener creates a garden, a cook creates a meal, a writer creates a story, a musician creates a song, a community creates a culture, a people create a future. Creation isn't limited to artists and inventors. It's part of being human. It's a biological impulse. And I would argue it is also a spiritual one. Because when we create something, anything really, we are participating in the ongoing work of creation itself. Can you imagine that? We are cooperating with the raw materials of the universe, taking what exists and shaping it toward beauty or usefulness or meaning. And that, I think, is one of the quiet miracles of being human. We're not passive observers in the world. We are participants in it, co-creators in the great unfolding story of creation, which means the question is not whether we will create. The real question is what we will create. Will we create beauty? Will we create justice? Will we create compassion? Will we create communities where people can breathe and belong? Or will we create more noise, more cruelty, more division? because humans are very good at being creators. History proves that. We create cathedrals and we create war. We create symphonies, and sadly enough, we create suffering. So the calling to be creators carries with it a responsibility to create wisely, to create compassionately, to create things that make the world a little more whole than it was before. That's part of why I love working with glass. Glass teaches patience. You can't rush it. Too much heat and it collapses. Too little heat and it refuses to move. You let it cool too quickly and it shatters. It asks you to pay attention, to respect the material, to work with it instead of forcing it. And slowly, very slowly sometimes, something begins to emerge. A wing, a bird, a small flash of beauty that didn't exist before. It's a humble thing, really. Just a glass hummingbird. But every finished piece began exactly like this, one wing at a time, one small act of creation after another. And maybe that's how most creation actually happens. Not in grand dramatic moments, but in quiet, patient acts repeated again and again and again. Little creators doing small, beautiful things until one day, without quite realizing it, we have helped shape a world that is a little more alive than it was before. Thank you so much for watching. God bless.